Hello, everyone. We'll wait a few more minutes before we start with webinar, let's say 2 more minutes, and then we will start. All right, I think we can start with this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll firstly introduce myself. So welcome everyone. My name is Stijn Cornelis from InfoCentry. I am the security compliance lead of the company. In my role, I normally combine my technical expertise with the in-depth knowledge that I have of compliance frameworks and legislation. I normally do sales meetings, but I always also do like an introduction of new employees, and when new employees join, I guide them towards the compliance strategies that we use and also give them the knowledge of the compliance frameworks and legislation. In addition to that, I also just do my normal day-to-day business, which is during projects myself with other employees of our end or just by myself. But that's it for now. You'll get to know me later on in this meeting. But I'm also joined by Ian from Vanta. And Ian, could you maybe introduce yourself a bit?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Ian. I have been in cybersecurity / compliance software vendors for the last 8 years. I'm a channel manager here at Vanta. I work very closely with our friends over at InfoCentry. And today we're going to take you through a little bit about an ISO project, which would also include, I guess, how Vanta can help accelerate and shift from manual to automated compliance management.
Sounds great. All right, so what's on the agenda for today? All right, we did our introduction, and I'm also going to talk about InfoCentry, if you don't know us yet. What is Vanta going to do? What does Vanta do? A small introduction or maybe a recap about ISO 27001 and why we think that you should do it with Vanta. But of course, you need to know what Vanta does, and so that's talked about in that chapter, and how InfoCentry can help with implementing Vanta. We will also talk about a small gap assessment that you can do after the webinar, and of course you need to know about the Vanta packages, so Ian will go through that with you. Let's maybe start with InfoCentry. For those who don't know us, or maybe that do know us and want a bit of a recap, we are a GRC company, so a governance, risk, and compliance company focused on these 3 pillars. So we have information security. This is mostly my responsibility. We also have privacy and business continuity. So privacy, you all know the GDPR legislation, but there are also some HIPAA legislation in the USA. And my boss, actually, Cedric Broses, is responsible for that topic. Business continuity is covered by Rashid, a new employee since, I think, a few months, actually half a year already. And he's responsible for those kind of projects. What we normally do, or what we try to do, is to be in the sweet spot of business, legal, and IT. So most of our employees, they have a background knowledge of one of these three topics, but we need to know all of them. So what I try to do is give them some business insight and some legal insights if needed, if they don't have it. But if they have a legal background, I will give them the IT background. Our normal way of working is that we start with an assessment, which is the baseline. It doesn't matter what framework you use. It doesn't matter what legislation that you use. We start with an assessment so we get to know your organization. After we've done the assessment, which is normally with an interview with a day or two, we prepare a roadmap or we prepare an assessment report, and then you can go over the implementation phase. During the implementation phase, we of course have decided what framework we're going to use to implement certain things, and we will guide you through, we can coach you towards the implementation or basically towards compliancy with that certain framework. How we do it normally is we start with preparing policies and procedures. You read them and you go over them, give some feedback towards us, and you implement the technical side of things. If clients of ours really want to do it on their own, that's possible as well, and we can just give feedback on the policies and procedures that they have written. But of course, it doesn't stop there. We have to go to a follow-up stage where we have to do an internal audit for some circumstances, but we also have to do an external audit, and we follow up to the grow and stay compliant of your company. We can do that with a CISO assistant as a service. We can do it as a DPO as a service. We can do however you prefer us to do so. We try to follow the needs of our clients as much as possible. More on that later, but I think we should really talk about Vanta here and what the services of Vanta has and the more technical side of things. So Ian, take it away.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to give a brief introduction into Vanta as a company, and just to go back to Stan's point there around the assessment, implementation, and I guess that whole vCISO package or that vCISO process. Where Vanta sits in that process is around the audit readiness piece and the continuous monitoring. So before we get into the technical side of things, who are Vanta? We are founded in 2018. We have over 10,000 customers globally right now, and we're across 58 different countries. Some of our strategic backers are Sequoia and Kraft, and we're also backed by CrowdStrike, JP Morgan, Combinator, HubSpot, Atlassian, and Workday. In 2024, we were voted #1 most innovative company, and we are consistently the #1 in trust management in the G2 series every single season. So I'll go into a little bit more details around the technology, but for now I'll hand back to Stan just to do a recap on ISO 27001.
All right, thank you, Ian. So before we take a deep dive into Vanta, let's maybe start a step back and talk about a framework that we implement the most within InfoCentry, which is ISO 27001. For those who don't know, ISO 27001, it's actually a governance framework related to managing your information security risks. It's basically split up into two parts. You have your high-level management structure and you have your controls. High-level management structure is based on the plan, do, check, act cycle and also a risk-based approach, where you normally start, for example, with the context of your organization, how leadership is involved in the organization, but also your risk assessment, your risk treatment plan, and out of that risk treatment plan is normally your controls. With those controls, you cover most policies, procedures, but also technical controls that you need to implement into your organization. Those controls, currently there are 93 controls that you need to implement or that you can implement, because you don't have to implement all of that. all of them, if they're not related to your organization, but they're split up into 4 clauses. You have your organizational controls, which are mostly your policies, procedures, roles, and responsibilities. You have your people controls, which are your HR-related controls, contracts with employees, contract with freelancers, those kind of controls. The physical controls, if you have a physical office, then there needs to be some measures taken. For example, is there a camera in place? Is there a badging system in place? Those kind of things. And then your technological controls. Most common ones are the development controls, logging and monitoring controls of certain applications. That is basically listed in the technical side of things. The main thing of ISO 27001 is managing your risks, but also improving your maturity of the organization. And improving the maturity of the organization can split up into two things. You have your technical measures, but also your organizational measures. And by implementing those measures, there are, of course, risks involved. And even if you use a compliance automation tool like Vanta, you can't just trust the dashboard. You really need to look at the dashboard, look in your technical analysis of certain things, for example, of your logging and monitoring, do it yourself, but the dashboard can really help. You can't automate everything in your organization, but it does help. There are some things that you need to do manually, and we're going to talk about it more later on. And audit readiness is not the same as security maturity. You need to do your audits. You need to do your internal audit, your external audit. You need to do some manual work, so you know if you're actually if your security maturity is actually increased over the year or decreased over the year. During 2024 and 2025, we talked with a lot of partners or competitors with Vanta, and we decided, Vanta is the most mature. So that's one of the main reasons why we chose to partner with Vanta over the year. But Ian's going to talk about more in depth on why actually you should choose with Vanta. And I agree with most and actually all of these points. So Ian, take it away.
Awesome. Cool. So I guess here comes the fun bit. There's a lot of different use cases why people come to Vanta. We automate compliance. Okay. As Stan said, you cannot automate all of it. But what we do is we help with automating a lot of the technical checks. First of all, to get you audit ready. And then we set up alerts for any shortfall in compliance if things change within your tech stack. For example, somebody gets a new machine and they don't enable multi-factor authentication, and maybe they disable screen lock, maybe they stop using their password manager. You get alerts for any of these shortfall in compliance, and there's hundreds and hundreds of technical checks that need to be done, first of all, to get you ready, and also to maintain that maturity. As Stan said, audit readiness is great to show an auditor, but when you're managing risks, it's not just about having it ready for 1 day or 2 days when the auditor is on site. These things need to be at a certain level all the time to reduce the risks within the business. And that's where the Vanta continuous monitoring comes into play. There's many other parallel reasons why people also choose Vanta. So automating compliance, that's where it all started. But we also have a risk management dashboard where you can create risks, manage risks, manage your inherent risks, etc., etc. You can then link your risks back to controls within a given framework. We can also help in the area of security questionnaires. So if you're in an organization where you receive a lot of questionnaires and due diligence questionnaires from your customers, we can help automate that process where you build a library. Vanta will source the answers and will also use AI to generate those answers and produce a really quick turnaround time. We also have a trust center. If you go to trust.vanta.com right now, you'll see Vanta's Trust Center. This is pretty much a live feed of how Vanta manages our compliance. And I'll show you what that looks like. in a couple of slides. We also help with the employee onboarding and offboarding process. So you can build all of your policies and onboarding tasks in Vanta. You can push all those tasks to your employees, and you can see who has completed which policies and which actions, and most importantly, who hasn't. And that's a continuous thing as well. As policies change, you need to push them out across the organization. You need validation that they have accepted those policies in order to maintain your compliance. The other thing we do is that we can help automate access reviews. We can also help you with your third party or your supply chain risk management. That's where you're sending your questionnaires to your vendors. We have a policy builder inside of Vanta 2, and we can also help manage and monitor your assets. Let me show you what a typical journey looks like with and without Vanta for ISO 27001. The traditional method is where you decide to start the process and take on this big project. It'll take hundreds of hours of researching the regulation. You'll rely on third-party consultants for advice and guidance. You'll do an internal audit across the organization, which can take up to a couple of weeks, if not months, depending on the size of the organization. You'll then spend around 200 to 400 hours manually gathering evidence on an Excel spreadsheet. And somewhere between 12 to 24 months, you'll get to your audit readiness stage when you're ready to schedule your external audit and go through that process. There's a huge amount of companies that will invest all this time, arrive at the audit, and still be nervous going into the audit. If you ask them, are you ready for this audit? They will say, we think so, or we hope so, or we think we have everything, but we don't know how things changed within the business since the last review. Whereas when you implement Vanta, you're connecting your tech stack to Vanta. So Vanta is continuously monitoring your entire tech stack. It's sending you alerts when you need to review policies, update policies, building in the approval processes, all within the one platform. The audit prep time is now reduced to around 40 to 80 hours in order to get audit ready. This is typically around getting audit ready from a technical aspect. So making sure MFA is enabled, our cloud trail logs enabled, password complexity, etc., etc. The journey can now take around 3 months or around 12 weeks, depending on the size of the company. Vanta can complete a technical gap assessment within 1 hour of you connecting your tech stack to Vanta. So that's 6 week, maybe 1 to 2 month audit that you might be looking at in a traditional method can now be done in around 1 hour. There are some caveats around that, around reviewing policies. How many policies do you have today? How many are you missing? But in and around 40 to 80 hours in terms of prep time, and in around 12 weeks, you can expect to have completed your external audit. So that would be beginning the process, policies, getting everything ready, becoming audit ready, validation from your vCISO partner, for example, and then going through the external audit, which is a huge difference in time and costs. So how does it work? And this is my favorite part because I just love the technology side of things. So you need to connect your tech stack into Vanta. We have over 360 integrations at Vanta. So we've done all the legwork here in terms of creating these integrations for you to connect your Azure, SharePoint, Intune, your CRM, all of these other systems. You simply click connect, log in, and now Vanta will start to run its automated tests around your network. So if you think about this for a second, Vanta has ISO 27001 built into the platform. It was built by auditors. We have 10,000 customers who are going through audits pretty much every single day. Then have your tech stack. When we put these two together, Vanta can now analyze everything inside of your tech stack with read-only permissions. And within 60 minutes, it can produce a result of here's your areas of compliance, here's your areas of non-compliance, which is a huge step in the right direction within 1 hour. The remainder of the alerts, which you can see here then, are areas of non-compliance. Maybe you don't have screen lock enabled on all your machines. Maybe there's some accounts that don't have MFA enabled, and there's hundreds of other checks that need to be done. So you'll spend the next kind of, a couple of days, weeks, depending on your time and resources, or maybe InfoSentry are going to spend the next, couple of days, weeks doing that for you. Once you complete your outstanding items, you will now be audit ready. When you're audit ready, you can start demonstrating trust via your trust center. And I love the trust center. I'm going to talk about the trust center very, very soon. But you can start demonstrating trust, whether that's internally to your C-levels, whether it's external to investors, vendors, customers, or to an auditor, for example. You can start demonstrating that trust immediately. And last but not least, you'll schedule your audit. The auditor comes into Vanta. We have a designated auditor portal. So you don't take everything out and the auditor has to go through, drives and SharePoints. The auditor comes in, invite the auditor in. They can see the controls. They can see the evidence. They can validate all of that and complete the audit all within Vanta. That's the journey to getting to getting certified. Then you have the continuous monitoring. So these tests that we spoke about here, these tests will run sometimes every hour, sometimes every day, sometimes every week. You can choose your own service level that you want. But what's happening here is you don't need to have a designated person staring at a screen here. Once you're audit ready and you've gone through your audit, all your alerts and notifications will be sent to specific people that you tell it to. So your legal team can go back and do what they need to do. Your exec team can go do what they need to do. Development, everybody can go back and do their normal routine. And instead of taking the hands off the steering wheel and forgetting about compliance for 10 months, 2 months before your audit comes up or your audit review, there's usually a big panic in the business. That doesn't happen anymore, because as areas of compliance start to fall off, you get a notification immediately and you can complete these small micro tasks on a continuous basis. So you're audit ready all the time. And that's a high quality ISMS. That's a high, a mature security posture. So it's not just proving for the auditor. It's about being audit ready all the time, whether you're proving that to your insurance company or investors or whatever the case may be. Having that high benchmark is really, really important, and it de-risks the business. So that was a lot of information. And this is another illustration of how it works. You input your data into Vanta. Vanta will categorize these into GRC capabilities and content. And then the output of that is that you're able to prove everything that you everything that you have, you're doing it in compliance with frameworks, and now you can prove it to whoever it needs to be. So we talk about automation. We talk about collecting evidence in an automated way. So sorry, you can probably hear my dog here. So this is a typical example of how the integrations work and how the automation works. So this is a typical example of AWS. Okay, we have Azure. We actually have over 360 integrations right now. So what happens is you click connect, you log in. Vanta will run, in this example, 106 tests. That's 106 manual tasks you would need to do, which Vanta will do on your behalf. I hate going back to all the same examples all the time, but you don't need to go and check all those MFAs and password complexities and CloudTrail logs and making sure your Entra ID is configured in the right way, or have people done background checks, etc., etc. So these are all tasks or tests that we run. If that test passes, that's evidence. So we're running that test, checking that machine for MFA. If that returns a pass, that's evidence. If it doesn't pass, it goes into a task bucket. And then when you complete that task, the test runs again. We now have the evidence that that's complete. In this example, there's 356 controls. We have over 40 frameworks: ISO 27001, 9001, NIS2, DORA, TSAX, GDPR, SOC 2. We can go on and on and on. So there's a lot of controls here, but this is just an example. So here's an example of a test. Two tests. The first one, is the backup frequency and retention in line with what's expected from the framework? We're checking that. You can run that test every hour, every day, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. If something changes, if someone changes a setting or someone changes something in the infrastructure or in your backup tool, we'll notify you. The next time that test runs, you get a notification. You get a notification which shows you what happened, what was changed, and you can log a ticket directly to Jira or ServiceNow or ClickUp from our platform. That's the only exception to the read-only integrations, is the ticketing system. Because if you log a ticket, then it needs to return that information back to Vanta as well when it's updated. So the typical flow would be backup frequency and retention insufficient or not in line with the compliance frameworks. Okay, cool. I just got a notification. Awesome. Log a ticket with IT. This is not compliant. It needs to be 90 days for PCI. Please change this. Log your ticket. Awesome. Ticket comes back, completed. Vanta test runs again, positive evidence. Awesome. Within a couple of minutes, we've now had an alert. We've taken action, and the next time that test runs, it's going to run automatically, and it's going to return the result. Whether it passes or fails, you'll know what action to take from there. Very similar with multi-factor authentication on infrastructure provider. Depending on how many users you have, this can be, a lot to monitor. But again, these are just 2 tests out of 109 tests only on AWS. The average SaaS company uses anywhere between 50 to 150 to 200 different applications within the business. This is just one, albeit a big and important one, but this is just one example. So when you click on a control, information backup as an example, this is a control in one of our frameworks. Vanta will automatically prescribe those tests, and it will automatically advise you of which documents you need in order for the auditor to accept this. Because you can produce any documents that you want. How do you know exactly what they're looking for? And we tell you. So for example, in this example, information backup copies information, software and systems shall be maintained and regular tested in accordance with agreed topics. So the first thing Vanta will do, it's going to run 3 tests. It's going to make sure the company has an approved operation security policy. Remember, we have a policy builder in Vanta, so we're able to just test that right now. We can go and test and see, does that policy exist? Has it been approved? Yes. When that passes, that's evidence. Awesome. We've automatically done that. Or maybe it fails, and then we got to take action because it's not passing, which means we don't have it, or we have it and it's not approved, and we can easily go see that. Another example is around documents. So which documents are auditors looking for? They're looking for data restore test evidence. They're looking for tabletop disaster recovery exercise. They're looking for backups completed for other databases. And this is an area that maybe can't be automated. And this is where InfoSentry come in with their expertise, is because we will advise you on what to do and make recommendations. So we're advising you to upload or attach backups by other databases. Okay, so you'll maybe take a screenshot, your backup is done by another database, you'll click the plus button, you'll add your document, but Vanta won't validate that document. We'll recommend that you upload it, but we won't validate it. So that's where InfoSentry come in, or your own CISOs, your own info security managers, where they're able to click in and they're able to either add these documents or they're able to validate it. If these documents live in a SharePoint, we can automatically collect them from SharePoint and attach them here. It's another form of automated evidence collection. But the validation piece is super important here. Technology checks are very easy. There's no gray area. It's either passing or failing. What we are testing in terms of documents is, have you attached a document to this control? And these are the 3 documents we recommend. Does the document exist? Yes, it does, but we won't validate it. Okay, that's important to know. This is our trust center. So think about the situation where all the hard work is done. You have implemented your ISMS. You have all your tasks completed. Vanta is 100% audit ready for your company. You've done all your policies, your documents, your risks. You've done the whole lot. And now you want to prove it. And if you go to trust.vanta.com right now, you'll see Vanta's Trust Center, but this is just for illustration purposes. Every single Vanta customer gets a Trust Center. It can be a public facing domain like ours, or it can be a private domain. So for example, when InfoSentry were doing their due diligence on Vanta, you know, where's the data hosted? You know, are you guys conducting backups? Send us your latest penetration testing report. We send them our Trust Center. Here's the link. You know, the majority of questions you have will be answered here. And what we're saying is, here are the compliance regulations that we are compliant with. SOC 2, Type 2, and HIPAA in this example. Vanta has way more than this. Because we have the frameworks in Vanta, we can also list the controls that relate to these frameworks in the Trust Center. And all these green lights means that as of 5 minutes ago, Vanta tested these controls and they're all passing. So there's 23 in infrastructure, 7 in organization. Internal security procedures, there's 17, 21 more here in data privacy. When you put all that together, there's 100, maybe more depending on the frameworks. And this is nearly a live feed, pretty much a live feed. Every Trust Center, you can see when it was updated. So it's not controls that were validated by an auditor 9 months ago. This is happening right now, and we're testing it right now. Companies who are willing to show that are very, very confident and secure in their compliance journeys. There's no personal information here. All we're saying is log management utilized. Yes. There are documents and resources on the left-hand side. You can build an NDA. So if your vendors are doing their due diligence on you, you can pre-approve them. So they might do a review of you every quarter. And you can send them the link. And because they have an NDA, because you have an NDA in place, they can say, yeah, here's your latest penetration testing report. Here's your insurance certification, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there. So you don't have to jump on calls. They don't want to jump on calls with you either. And they can do this within 10 minutes without disrupting their whole day or dedicating an hour to a meeting, which they can actually self-serve themselves. This is the first step in reducing the workload in due diligence exercises. And because you have everything in Vanta, all your controls, your documents, your policies, your vendor information, all your applications are connected in there. We put that information here. Again, there's nothing sensitive here, and they can self-serve themselves. For anything outside of that, we do have the security questionnaire automation, which is then the next level on from that. Maybe the questionnaire comes in and it's in a portal, or maybe it's in, you know, a different format and they need it in their way. We can help with that as well.
And Ian, maybe, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I received a private chat message over the Trust Center,
Okay.
and the question was about, can you decide on what you can actually show to your clients and what you can hide? And I think the question is yes. You can hide a few things if you don't want certain things to show on your Trust Center. But Ian, maybe you can elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, of course. Yep. So you can pick and choose what you want to share. Some people don't, let's say, for example, a test runs and maybe it fails, okay, for some reason. You can choose whether you want that red tick or red X to show on your Trust Center, or you can choose to hide it. Okay, maybe it's irrelevant to this particular customer, so you can hide it. Even if you're hiding it, that test is in Vanta as a failed test. So whoever owns that test has got a notification to take action. So that will be remediated within an hour, a couple of hours, maybe even a day sometimes. And then when it's passing again, when that test runs again, it's going to pass, and then the green tick comes back. So you can choose to remove failing controls, and you can also decide on your resources that you want to share. Maybe you don't want any resources in there. You can completely customize it yourself. We're comfortable sharing these things. We're not comfortable sharing these. So absolutely, you can customize it. Moving on to some statistics. You can automate up to 90% of the process to get ready for an audit. That's all your technology checks. Even if you have the policies built in there in Vanta, we're checking the policy exists. We're checking that it went through the right approval process. We're checking who approved it, et cetera, et cetera. But again, that 10%, you will never get to 100%. It's just not possible. You still need a human to validate that information, make sure it's correct, and make sure that it's up to date. Things like, you know, executive CVs. So there's some frameworks that require org charts and that kind of stuff. There's always going to be that manual effort and validation piece that exists, but automating 90% is huge, absolutely huge. And for me, it's the continuous monitoring piece. Whether you're doing this to kind of like win bigger deals, or whether you're doing this to have a mature security posture because you want to protect your brand. You know, you want to make sure that you have the highest standard all the time, not just once, just to get some purchase orders. And Vanta helps with both. So the audit readiness, let's get there, let's get the certificate, and let's start getting bigger deals. But then as you start to grow, you start to think, yeah, well, it's not just a point in time. We need to be compliant every day, all the time. And Vanta's alerts, monitoring, and notification help with all of that. We have 25% more tests than our nearest competitor. I think when it comes to the Azure suite, I think we have 50% more if you're working on the Azure suite in comparison to our nearest competitor. If you have less automation, it means you have you have more manual work. And if you're choosing to automate compliance, you might as well automate as much as possible. You know, it takes 50% less time versus a traditional audit. It will cost around 10% of the costs when you look at a full return on investment over 3 years. Because compliance is just one piece. But so you might be looking for a compliance automation tool or a trust management tool, as we call it now. But then you want to start looking at vendor risk management. Maybe you've looked at a different tool for vendor risk. Maybe you've looked at a different tool for managing internal risk. Maybe you've looked at loads of other different tools. Whereas when you put all of that together in one platform and you can eliminate those costs and put it all in one place, you are now much more efficient. Everybody's working from the same platform. Communication is significantly improved. Takes less training to get trained up just on one platform. Everybody knows what's going on. And the level of automation, when you combine all of that, the cost of the project is around 10% of the traditional cost. You will see a reduction in sales cycles. There's nothing worse than seeing a procurement process going on and on and on. People are not available. High holiday season. I'm on holidays. You're on holidays. We can't have a call. We need to push out 2 weeks and all this other stuff. Whereas with the Trust Center, you send them the link. They can do this before they even have their morning coffee. They can do their due diligence and unlock that purchase order for you. So we see our customers having reduced sales cycles by around 30%. And for everything outside of that, in terms of security questionnaires, we see a 95% faster answer rate. So there's some companies that work with us and they could do 20 to 30 questionnaires per week. They take them in. It takes them weeks to answer them. It's all repetitive. There's just a big database somewhere. They try and find the answers. I would hate that job. With Vanta, you upload the Excel into Vanta. Vanta will source the answer from the platform, drop the answers in everywhere. And now all you're doing is saying, okay, here's the answer Vanta has produced. Yes, 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 yes. And not only that, Vanta will provide you multiple answers. So it might say, does Vanta encrypt data at rest? And maybe the first answer might be, yes, it does. Here's a link to the Vanta Trust Center. But the next answer might just say, yes. And maybe we prefer just that shorter answer without the link. Or maybe we want longer answers or shorter answers. So you can then click which answers you prefer. Machine learning now starts to kick in. Vanta will now recognize, okay, they want shorter answers. We're going to put that as the first answer to make it even more efficient over time. So it's 95% faster to use Vanta in that area as well. Last but not least is our integrations. We've 373 integrations. That means in order for you to connect your tech stack is super fast and super easy. It also means that we have built all of the necessary tests required for those applications. So for your Entra ID, there's another multi-factor authentication requirement there. We've built those tests for on your behalf. That's how we get up to that high level of automation. We've all that work done. If you're moving away from compliance, we are the furthest thing from manual compliance. We are the closest thing to fully autonomous compliance, which we know fully autonomous compliance isn't realistic yet. So if you're making that journey, there is no better place to be to move away from that manual, repetitive tasks. And this is why we build these integrations, we add to them every single month. And it's not just creating the integration without the tests isn't adding any automation. Whereas we have tests for every single integration that we have. Last year, we did 240 feature releases last year. They tell us that was more than Google, I don't know, but that's what they tell us. And we plan on doing something similar, something very similar this year. We're investing heavily in the risk module, customizing risks, building it the way that you want it. But the integrations piece is where the automation comes. And especially, again, if you're a Microsoft house, 50% more automation comes from Vanta over anybody else that's in this space right now. I've been talking for a long time. I hope that it was quite valuable in terms of the technical aspect. I'm going to give you a break from my Irish accent now and pass you back to Stan for a little bit. So Stan, back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ian. So yeah, how can InfoSentry actually help you? Well, I think there are some current clients of InfoSentry here. We can help you in any of these steps. We can help you during the assessment. We can help you during the implementation phase. We can guide you towards an internal audit, but we can also do the internal audit. We can't do an external audit, of course. We are not a certificate body, but we can, again, guide you towards or in the external audit. And through the managed service platform, we can also do the follow-up of your organization. Let's maybe start with the assessment. I'm going to talk about it a bit later on, but there will be a way that you can connect your integrations to Vanta for a certain time. And we can guide you towards it and guide you with instructions on how to do it. But we can also give you a roadmap on what you need to do during an implementation phase. What you have to do first, what you have to do second, what you have to do at last. So you have a nice overview of what you need to do during your implementation of Vanta. Internal audits, yeah, we also do internal audits in the Vanta platform. So Ian talked about an external auditor having access to your Vanta environment, and he can go through the Vanta, going to Vanta checks and Vanta policies and procedures. We do the same thing. So you invite us towards your Vanta environment. We click on certain policies, procedures. Maybe there is like half a day of interviews where we need to make sure that we understand things correctly. But after the half day of interviews, we can go back to the Vanta platform, do some checks, read through policies and procedures, and basically make our summary of the internal audits. An external audit normally works the same way. He also goes through the platform, has some questions, and we can help you with answering those questions. Follow up. If there is a deal between the two of us, then we have access, or we can have access to your Vanta application, and if needed, do some follow-up on certain people that they have to do some certain tests or maybe basically fix a few things, or just during the internal audit on a yearly basis. And with that, there's actually a match, of course, between Vanta and InfoSentry, where the technical measures are mostly on your end. So you do the integrations, you run the tests, and have a talk with more employees on your end on how to fix certain technical measures. What we can do is guide you towards the organizational measures and internal audits. So that at the end of the story, you are ISO 27001 compliant, or with some other frameworks or legislation compliant. So after this meeting or after this webinar, you will receive an email where there's a brief summary of what we have talked about today, and also the gap self-assessment. So that is basically a free self-assessment against one framework by making the integrations to your systems. So how to do that, that will also be listed in that in a meeting, and maybe you have a one-to-one meeting on how to actually do it. But the key of this is that you have the option to make a Vanta account, connect your integrations, and then see what is the compliance percentage of a certain framework. And Ian, maybe you can elaborate a bit more, or maybe I've done enough, but yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just jump in here. Like I've seen it, from a lot of vendors that I've been with, that, a 30-day trial, and people are like, yeah, do we have 30 days? We need to schedule that into our, into our working schedules, etc. 7 days is more than enough. Sometimes we do same day POCs. Now that's for people that are like very dedicated. It's quite urgent. So we've seen 1 day POCs, but 7 days is loads of time, especially if you're working with InfoSentry. The Vanta integrations will be done within 1 hour. If you think about then a 1 hour consultation with InfoSentry that afternoon or the next day, they'll be able to go through what's actually happening inside of your tech stack. So yeah, I just don't want you to think that, oh, we need to dedicate 30, 60 days to a POC here. 7 days is plenty of time to complete that. That's all.
Yep, indeed. And again, after this webinar, you will receive an email. Just answer to the email if you're interested in this self-assessment, and yeah, we will give you the instructions on how to do so. Then the last thing that we want to discuss is the Vanta packages, and I think that's something for Ian to go over, and then I will gather some questions about things that we've talked about, and yeah, answer them later on.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so Vanta has a couple of different packages that you can choose from. Our two most popular ones are called Core, which you can see here on the left, and then Growth. So the Core package is everything to get you started. If you're kind of a small company, anywhere up to kind of 200 employees, then the Core pack, and you're just worried about making a start on automating compliance. Maybe everything's on spreadsheets right now, and transitioning to a tool is just your primary objective right now. It includes all our integrations, automated tests, asset inventories, employee onboarding and offboarding. It includes a 5x5 risk management module, custom service levels, policy templates, and of course the Trust Center. If you're a company who is quite mature in security and compliance, and you want to take it that one step further, we usually see companies, kind of 100 plus up to 1,000, maybe more. They're usually more interested in the Growth package because they have a stable compliance handle already, but now they need even more efficiencies. So they need to start automating access reviews. They need to start customizing risks. So customizing risks might be where it's a 10x10 instead of a 5x5. And customizing a lot more, creating custom tests and very complicated networks and so on and so forth, and also automating those questionnaires. So really, depending on your starting point and what your objectives are, these two packages are usually the ones that people choose first. We have enterprise packages available, and we can talk about those on a one-on-one session afterwards if anybody is interested in doing that. But nearly everybody will fall into one of these two packages. So with that, I guess the final kind of, wrap up here on the back of the slides is, we can do a gap assessment. There's absolutely no charge for that. It'll be run in tandem with the experts at InfoSentry via Stan and team. And you should just send an email directly to Stan or your contact at InfoSentry, or LinkedIn, or whatever the case may be. We'll connect you with the right people, and we will get that going for you. Cool, awesome. Stan, is there any questions that that have come in, and we
Yes,
can take
I've
those? I
received
think
a
we have
few.
5 minutes left here.
And if you have any more questions, yeah, feel free to put them in chat. If we don't have the time for that, I will come back to you after this webinar. But there is a question over here that states, are there automated checks for on-premise endpoints? For example, the password policy in Active Directory pushed through group policies.
Yeah.
Ian, if you have an answer for that?
Yeah, sure. Yes is the short answer. And there's two ways we can do it. One, if you're using an MDM system and we have an integration with that MDM, then we can collect that data from there. The other one is if you don't have an MDM system, Vanta has its own lightweight agent. So you can deploy that agent on your on-premise servers if you need to, and we can collect that information from there. So yes is the short answer, and those are the two ways in how we do it.
Then the next one is there like an overview of all the compliance frameworks available? The answer for that is if you start with the gap assessment, you will have an overview of all the frameworks, but I think, Ian, there is also an overview on the website.
Correct. Yep. So you can go to the Vanta website. We will list out all of our frameworks. I think there's 40 of them now. There's nearly one new framework pretty much every month. There are some use cases where very specific industry, and you can create what's called a custom framework. So you can build that framework inside Vanta. Maybe it's heavily based on, CIS or NIST CSF. You can use our library of controls. You can filter and be like, yep, we need all these controls, which means all the automation goes with it, but it's considered a custom framework. We have some companies who combine frameworks where they combine ISO 27001, and another framework for their own kind of internal security maturity. And you can absolutely do that as well.
All right. And I think that's it. I'm not receiving any more questions, but if you have some, feel free to reach out after this meeting. Ian and myself are available all day. And summary of this will be sent over email. You can also request the gap assessment. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And Ian, pleasure to have you as a co-host for this webinar. And thank you for elaborating a bit more about the solution of Vanta. And we'll keep in touch, of course.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.